Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first EVIIWG meeting of 2025. Let's move to the agenda slide. Today's meeting, we will be looking at level setting by reviewing the order language and what was required and still is required of the EVIIWG. And after that, we would talk about the next steps and the discussion of SAPA. Today's meeting will be recorded, and the presentation and the recording will be posted to DMM and to the EVIIWG webpage. Please remember to use chat or hand raise functions. We do have somebody monitoring that. If you have any questions, and feel free to break through if you want to, get additional information or have additional questions as we are going through the presentation today. I guess we can move to the next slide. Just to start to level set a little bit, some of the comments that we received were, we feel were outside of the scope of what the order was requiring of the EVIIWG. Therefore, I just wanted to level set with everybody and go through the midpoint order on pages 28 and 29. The EVIIWG, this particular EVIIWG process was to address and advance transparency, the queue backlog, wait times, and the application development, among other issues that the application process was having. So, in addition, it was to establish a standard process for the interconnection applications, which could be shortened and ideally streamlined the intake of applications that are driven by the electrification in the CLCPA. And with that context, the Commission directed Con Edison to submit a straw proposal describing the efforts that they put forth when they streamlined their queue management system for consideration. And so that's where we are right now. If we go to the next slide. Additionally, throughout this process, we've had 7 EVIIWG meetings, which all the recordings and the presentations are available on the EVIIWG website with matter 2400339. The meetings consisted of stakeholder presentations and a review of the straw proposal modifications based on stakeholder feedback. The straw proposal has been on the EVIIWG webpage for parties to download and make comments and edits to since the first EVIIWG meeting. And the straw proposal was submitted to DMM for comments. And it was not SAPA, these are just maybe informal comments, which the comment period ended on 1/16/25, and there was a comment period which ended on 2/3/25. So we have, we received several comments from EDF, that we received joint comments from EDF, EVIIWG, and VGIC. We received comments that weren't joint comments from EDF and the EVIIWG, and then we received comments from the joint utilities as well as reply comments from the joint utilities and via the VGIC Council and CalSTAR. And we have Zach right now that's going to go through the comments. He summarized them and he will be discussing them. And feel free, if you have questions or you need further information on the comments, I'm assuming that the commenters are on the line so we can, get further clarification if necessary. Go ahead, Zach.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. So yeah, as Lisa said, we'll view this as kind of, if you want to add additional context or if you'd like to jump in, ask clarification questions as necessary, please raise your hand and we'll have someone calling you as we go. So to begin with, we have our joint comment from EDF, EVIIWG, and VGIC. The comment went over phased interconnection inclusion in the EVIIWG. And then as Lisa mentioned, we'll kind of go over at the end if these are in scope or out of scope, but just to quickly summarize. So beginning with the implementation of phased interconnection, recommending the EVIIWG address flexible interconnection, including what factors would be helpful to include alongside flexible interconnection, such as education and outreach, load forecasting, what's capable of implementation by the utilities and acceptable to customers, and then reporting requirements that would be associated with that. Additionally, the joint comment requested more clarity in the operations innovation section of the document. Moving on to EDS comment. This comment stated that the proposal could use more discussion on optimization of the interconnection process, grid beneficial charging behavior such as managed charging, and phased interconnection as a standard option for EV charging projects. On the note of managed charging, the comment stated that utilities could, for example, include education materials at the beginning of the interconnection process on what options are available to customers in each utility's associated programs. The comment also suggested the EVIIWG format could be updated or modified to provide participants with the most up-to-date versions of the redline documents, along with the conversation on red lines, go through the exact red lines in each meeting to indicate what specific changes were made, and then providing a dedicated time to discuss the proposals under consideration in each meeting. And then there was language proposing removing certain language related to mandated timelines, the EAM language, and then, language included about administrative budgets. IREC's comment discussed wanting more clarity on certain aspects of standardizing the application process, such as the utilities tracking and reporting end-to-end timelines. Additionally, providing a clearer process for customers to connect to EV infrastructure loads. So sections 1.3 and 4.2 were provided as certain instances where there could be more clarity added. Additionally, it was recommended to incorporate mandated timelines for interconnection, and IREC cited California and a couple other states that have either finalized processes or are in the process of doing so. Additionally, IREC highlighted certain provisions that could be necessary to streamline the interconnection process, including phased interconnection, a simplified or expedited review process, information sharing after utility review, project modifications, and dispute resolutions. IREC also suggested that the EVIIWG incorporate some needed changes to the proposal and continue the working group into a stage 2 to continue addressing certain questions and issues that have been raised in these comments. And then finally, some changes to the structure of the EVIIWG similar to EDS recommendations. VGIC's comment covered the development of a flexible interconnection framework with static import limits and dynamic import limits that are both described in the bullets below. And then additionally recommended improving data portals, the customer engagement process, data reporting requirements, all to aid that flexible interconnection process. The joint utilities comment and then subsequent reply comment is next. So in the initial comments, the joint utilities reiterated support for the current proposal and highlighted the 7 EVIIWG meetings that have happened to date. In reply comments, the utilities stated that many of the comments are out of the scope of the EVIIWG directives in the midpoint review order, notwithstanding the potential merits of some of the suggestions. And then the utility cites certain clauses of the proposal, such as the dispute resolution process, which Con Edison noted was included as an example on page 19, the project milestone portal, which is in section 2.4, and the proposal guidelines are currently followed with each utility implementing them individually. So they note that for the instance of Con Edison's innovation section in 1.3, many of these were included specific to Con Edison and the number of projects they were receiving compared to some of the other utilities. And then finally, CalStart's reply comment. So CalStart cited that the proposal should define a more standardized process across the utilities, include phased service connections as a standard option for EV projects, and to direct the utilities to communicate to customers how certain bridging solutions could impact their project timelines and costs. CalStart agreed with removing the language around mandated timelines and references to EAMs from the proposal. CalSTART recommended that some specific timelines may be on the current scope of the proposal, but that the EVIIWG could be brought into focus on many of these items that have been covered in comments, and that there are lessons that can be taken from California's experience in developing an interconnection process with mandated timelines, such as processing certain steps parallel rather than sequentially, and then finally noted the ability of working groups to serve as a better forum for this to allow open communication and back and forth dialogue. So that is a quick summary of the comments we've received. With those in mind, did you want to cover this part, Lisa, or would you like me to continue?
Sure, why don't you go back?
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions or need further clarification? I'm hoping we have everybody on the line. I don't see any hands raised, but we'll give you a minute to Cole, Jermaine.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Just a question on I think it was on the joint utilities slide, if you could go back one. Just that last bullet at the bottom there states that the proposal guidelines are currently followed with each utility implementing them individually. I don't know if there's someone from the JU who can just explain what that is. That meant to say that like the things that are in the modified proposal are things that are already being done by the utilities, or something else? Just not totally clear to me what that means.
Take that one. This is Katie from a conference room at Con Edison. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yes, that means that each of these utilities are following the practice laid out in all the sections except for 1.3, which is noted there, and then then each utility is implementing that practice according to what its engineering standards are, or what the other unique requirements are for each utility. So does that speak to your question, Cole?
Yeah, I think so, Katie. Thank you. So, I mean, just to clarify from that, then, does the JU see or I don't know if you can speak for the JU, so I don't want to put that on you, but I guess from Con Ed's perspective, like, is the modified proposal simply like meant to memorialize practices that the utilities are already doing then, or is there something more that the modified proposal is doing if these are things that the utilities are already doing?
Yeah, thanks, Cole. I would say it's both. There are, for example, in the innovation section, there are some practices that one of the utilities might adopt in the future if it were to have the volume of applications ongoing at one time that Con Ed experiences. But they do memorialize the queue management practices that we have all considered and then honored in how we have constructed the program. You might also remember that there's a section on specifically speaking to when there's a potential waitlist situation where there's a really high volume of applications. So, we Con Edison, for example, don't need to use we don't need to implement the practices in that section every day of every year, but when we do experience a waitlist, we refer back to that section and are implementing those practices that are part of our policy when we are experiencing a waitlist situation.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification, Katie.
Sure, yep.
Are there any other questions or need for clarification? Actually, I was wondering if anybody from CalSTART was on, because I have a question on working groups act better venues and written comments, and I was just wondering how, if somebody from CalSTART on?
Hi, I'm from CalSTART. I'm on the call.
I
But
don't want to put you on the spot because you might not have written these, so,
yeah, if anything, I could bring this back to the person that did write the comments. Any questions?
oh, okay, wonderful. Yeah, and you can just email us at the EVSE@DPS email. Yeah, my question was just the editing of a document during a meeting, how they would suggest doing something like that, because it seems kind of like a heavy lift to edit during a group where there's a group of people where we're trying to discuss something. So I was just wondering if they had some specifics on how that would work. So thank you for taking that back. What about anybody else? Well, let's give you a minute and see.
Yeah, I have a comment. This is Richard from New York Best on this topic.
Hi, Richard.
Hi. So I had a call with Alex who wrote these comments. And I think this is more about kind of gauging stakeholder input rather than simply presentations, maybe like recording down what other people are looking at in the straw proposal and have it be a working group where we engage in separate issues and kind of gather which stakeholders are in the room, what they're interested in, and have it more of a conversation. I think that's what they were getting at partially.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. And yeah, that's helpful to hear.
And this is Mari with EVIIWG. You know, we had a comment
Mari.
similar. Hi, and we had a comment similar on the structure, and I do think this gets to that a little bit. I know it's a little vague right there, but on the slide, what we are trying to say is, I guess, making sure that we can see the red lines. We know what's so I think a lot of, you know, there was some work that was done that was kind of behind the scenes. And so we didn't actually see the red lines until we were, you know, able to comment on them, but we weren't actually involved in helping to write those red lines. So I guess this would be a way, and this is similar to Alex's comment with CalSTART, a way to kind of work collaboratively on those red lines versus just seeing the end product. And I know you were taking into account, you know, comments through the presentations and the initial comments as well. So I'm not saying those were discounted, but it would be kind of a more direct way to work on them together so that you could see, you know, whether it was moving in a direction that you agreed with or not. So you could actually say, yes, I agree with this, or no, I don't agree with this. And you kind of have that recorded. So that's where the kind of more consensus-based process comes in. So that was kind of explaining a little bit more of our comments on that.
Hi, Mari. This is Stephanie McDermott from DPS. I think that's all really helpful. And I think there may be some confusion, or, you know, maybe we didn't explain something well enough during the meetings, but we've put the draft proposal on the EVIIWG website and on DMM from the very beginning, with the hope that folks who are involved with the EVIIWG would, you know, download it, edit it, add anything, add comments, and send it to us. And we received nothing like that. So, you know, to the extent that there were any red lines, they were generally just from the JU in response to comments that came up during the meetings. And I'm not sure if there's a way to share the document so that everybody can redline it together. I foresee that being a perhaps confusing process, but, you know, we did ask for folks to submit comments and look at the document throughout this process, in case that was unclear.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. That was a little unclear to me. I mean, I do remember you all saying, you know, keep submitting comments, and there wasn't like especially at the initial, you know, informal comments, it was like, feel free to submit, you know, before each meeting, and, you know, we can try to bring back up any discussions that we need to have. But I wasn't clear on red lines would be accepted, but yeah, that's, you know, it's good to know now, I guess. But yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, and I apologize that that wasn't clear from the beginning. Also,
If
as
I
we
could just-
continue.
Sorry,
Oh,
if I
sorry.
could just jump in on this. Stephanie, I just wanted to respond to that point. I mean, I think it's not totally accurate to say that you didn't receive any comments. There were a number of comments from parties that were filed in April and May on the original proposal that never really got discussed during the working group and weren't even available to other parties on the EVIIWG website until I think September. So Mari, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but, you know, I think the thrust of the recommendation here is, you know, making things like that available as standard and talking through them during the working group, you know, would be a way to build that consensus earlier and recognize that, like, there were opportunities to share thoughts and the informal comments were kind of open throughout this entire process, but the comments themselves aren't particularly helpful if they're never a subject of discussion during the meetings.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And Stephanie, I hear your point too about how it's, you know, difficult to kind of figure out how to really work together on red lines, but I do think there's a way to do it, you know, especially as certain topics come up. And I think there were certain things that were addressed early on that you were talking about, whether it was in or out of scope, like the, you know, V2G. Initially, there was some back and forth on whether that was in scope or not. But so something like that, where you get those initial comments, there's something that is maybe a little controversial or something that you're not sure should be included, and then bringing that to the group as a topic first, and then, you know, how do we actually incorporate that is another, like, where you kind of could work together on how that gets incorporated in the language. But I do see that it can be difficult. But I think, to Cole's point, I do think having that opportunity is the main point, to be able to say, yes, this should be included, or no, it should not. Or, you know, the utilities in the proposal are saying, we don't think timelines should be included. You know, that leads to more of a compliance mindset. Having a discussion on that during these calls would be helpful, like just helping to, you know, bring in other examples from other states and talk about why that is, would be helpful to have that conversation with the full group, just as an example.
Thank you both. I think that's extremely helpful for us to hear. I just want to, what I think I'm hearing is that you would like to hear more of a discussion about the comments and, you know, perhaps particular topics that come out of the comments rather than just, you know, going through the document. Is that accurate?
Yes. And yeah, kind of building, you know, understanding that the different viewpoints on those topics, and, you know, figuring out how to move forward from that. Usually, like in some of the other working group processes we're involved in, that consensus or non-consensus is documented. And if there's something that just doesn't have consensus, then that's what moves to the commission to decide. But anything consensus related can kind of move forward, and then you figure out how to incorporate it through red lines.
Got it. That makes sense. Richard, I see your hand.
Yes. Yeah, so this all makes sense, like to Cole and Marie's point. And I'd just like to say that New York Best experienced a similar scenario because we submitted comments on vehicle to grid fairness and the difference between the two study timelines for the SIR process and the EV load studies. And the comments were received, and but I brought it up again in a second meeting, and it felt like there wasn't preparedness for a discussion on those comments, and were taken back a second time, but never really discussed as an agenda item. So I agree with all the points between Maria and Cole.
Thanks. And it was never our intention for anybody to feel unheard or for any topics to feel sort of off limits. I just want to say, though, that, you know, the commission authorized the EVIIWG to be formed to discuss like a very discrete portion of this issue. So, you know, to the extent that maybe we didn't talk about EVIIWG, Richard, or some of the other topics, I think that was maybe us trying to stay within those parameters that the commission set.
Where you want? Sorry, this is the first slide.
So, you know, where are we now? It's our position that some of the comments have identified bigger issues than what was required for the scope of the EVIIWG, and specifically for the straw proposal. One major difference was what the queue management document was supposed to address. The midpoint order, again, requested that Con Edison submit the straw proposal that described how they managed their application queue, which was to be addressed through the EVIIWG. The slide right now are the list of items or issues that we feel were beyond the scope. It's, you know, the flexible interconnection, the energizing tracking tool, phased interconnection, the EAM, and the dynamic import. And in no way do we dismiss these, and these are very important and need discussion, but we do feel that they are outside of the proposal, the scope of the what was required of the EVIIWG at this time, because all of these issues do require the commission determination. So staff does, what's the next slide? So I think I just went through, I think I skipped a slide. No. So to clarify the scope and adjust the comments, the document will be SAP'd for further comments and commission direction. Staff is open to adding specific questions to be SAP'd with the document. For example, one of the questions could be, should the scope of the EVIIWG be broadened, and if so, if yes, how? So if anyone has questions that they want added to the SAPA notice when we SAPA this document, please let us know, maybe even now, or you can email us at the EVSE email. The totality of the work being done by the EVIIWG that has been done so far by the EVIIWG, including the draft proposal and the comments, will be submitted and will be reviewed by the commission.
And I just want to add, kind of to Cole's point earlier, that the commission will review all of the comments that are in the proceeding, not necessarily just the ones that were submitted by January 16th or that reply comment period. So the commission can look at the entire record. But we'll pause here. If anybody does have questions that they think should be included, please let us know. or like Lisa said, you can email us later. Okay, I see Mari's hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Can you go back to the previous slide? I just wanted to clarify something. You have phased interconnection listed here, but because it's in the modified proposal as an option, I just was curious why that would be excluded or outside of the scope here.
That's a great question, Mari, and we'll have to take that back.
Okay. And then, sorry, just one other. I see Cole's hand up too. Sorry, Cole. Actually, Cole, if you have something else on this slide, I can wait.
Yeah, thanks, Mari. So a question on the next bullet on the EAM. You know, we had made a recommendation in EDF's comments around removing language regarding EAMs from the modified proposal, and it's just not clear to me from the phrasing on this slide if this is saying that our recommendation around EAMs is outside the scope of the proposal, or the language around EAMs that we recommended removing is outside of the scope of the proposal.
So I think it's both, because I think the commission needs to decide on if this language itself that's in the document is outside of the scope. And what was your second question?
I think that answers it. I mean, the broader question is like, you know, there were a number of specific red lines that we had recommended, you know, outside of the recommendations around flexible interconnection or broadening the scope of it, just like changes to the specific language. So is staff proposing to adopt any of those or discuss any of those, or is it just planning to SAPA the modified proposal as is, and that will be a subject for parties to comment on the modified proposal?
Yeah, thanks, Cole. I think that's a great point. So at this time, we're planning to SAPA the document as is, and we're hoping that those extra questions could address some of those comments and concerns that you've raised. Like, are these topics that we've identified as perhaps being outside the scope of the proposal, should they be in the proposal, or should the EVIIWG, you know, convene again to get more information on these topics? We're not trying to say that, you know, these are absolutely outside the scope and the commission shouldn't even weigh in. I think our hope is that we'll get more comments and figure out how to incorporate these.
Okay, I mean, I would question from that, like, what the point of the comments that we already filed were. If the plan is just take the modified proposal, SAPA that as is without any modifications to what parties have commented on, and get comments again, I mean, my comments are just going to be the same thing. There may be other parties that comment as well, but I will say I'm disappointed that this meeting is not being used to talk through what may be things that we can gain consensus on or are worth a discussion here while we have an EVIIWG meeting, rather than just kicking it again to comments where parties are likely to reiterate the same points.
So the directive from the commission was for the EVIIWG to come up with this draft proposal, and from what I'm hearing and what I've heard over the last EVIIWG meetings is that there is a lot of non-consensus. And I'm not saying that the comments that you've already received haven't been considered. They are part of the record and are part of what the commission can consider going forward.
So you want to resubmit?
So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't want to resubmit, you don't have to. We're certainly not trying to, you know, duplicate work.
No, I understand that. I appreciate that, Stephanie. I recognize that, you know, all of the comments are part of the record and can be considered by the commission. I think my point is that, you know, before the commission considers the proposal, my understanding was that part of the work of the EVIIWG was to develop as best as possible a consensus proposal, recognizing that there are some issues that consensus may not be possible on. And it just seems like we're skipping that part of it and not doing the working in a working group, and rather just there's a proposal we can comment on and the commission will decide. So I'm not sure that there's much we can do at this point, it seems, but I would just say, you know, we will certainly recommend that the work the EVIIWG should continue, and we made a number of recommended modifications in our comments around those practices. And I think this would be part of that, that there is a lot of working that the working group can be doing that it doesn't seem to be happening now. Mari, I'm sorry, I cut in for a short question and then kind of stole the stage there. So please take it back.
No, I think this actually answered my second question, which was, I had thought in a previous meeting that you all at the DPS had said you were going to be trying to incorporate other recommendations into the modified proposal before it got SAPA'd. So, but it sounds like it's going to the commission or to this comment period as is. Is that correct?
Mari, before I respond to your question, Katie, I don't know if from the JU, if you had any responses.
Hi, Stephanie. Yes, this is Katie from Con Edison. I just wanted like a quick clarification here, just to make sure that we're, as a group of stakeholders and participants in this call, are interpreting things the same way. But it sounds like you're saying that, and I think that this is like helpful to keep our momentum going. It sounds like we're like reaching a milestone for the queue management proposal itself, insofar as it's covering topics that are strictly related to queue management and moving to the next phase. And is it correct that you're saying there's also this open question that you're looking for the commission to weigh in on whether the EVIIWG will continue and will address, you know, some of these topics, if not all of them? And I think that, you know, speaking from Con Edison's perspective, we're, you know, interested in continuing to explore these topics and how to improve generally with stakeholder involvement. Just want to make sure that we're finding that we're kind of getting to a milestone with the queue management piece in particular, and also getting the direction on where we focus on these topics for discussion. So I just, if that's the right interpretation, like, let me know. If I'm misinterpreting, would appreciate redirection.
Okay. I'm going to try to answer Mari's question first. And Mari, please, if I get this wrong, let me know, or if I've missed part. My understanding of your question is, you know, whether there is going to be further discussion on any of these topics or other comments that have been submitted thus far, either in the very beginning of the proceeding or recently, and whether those comments will be further incorporated into the document, or if we're just going to SAPA the document as is. And to be completely honest with you, I think our plan was originally to submit it as is, but we've gotten so much pushback today that we're going to reconsider that approach and figure out how to make sure that, you know, there is more of a consensus on some items and, you know, make sure everyone's heard. And Katie, to your question, we did see this as sort of a milestone. You know, the queue management, in our opinion, in staff's opinion, was the focus, and these other topics were extremely important, but were outside of the initial scope. But again, we're going to have to take this back now. And Rick,
I was going to say thanks, Stephanie, that's helpful.
Yeah, hi, this is Rick Rosa from Avangrid. I guess, prior, when I did raise my hand prior to your comments, Stephanie, I was just going to ask, if there was an opportunity with the stakeholders who feel strongly about these things, and to be clear, it's not that the JU don't feel strongly about these things, because I think we all, to some degree, are looking at a lot of these, maybe not a lot, but some of these issues. If there was an opportunity to come to consensus that EVIIWG, may just not be the right place for these things to be to be have conversations about them, have serious interactions about how to move forward on some of these topics, and have additional, gaining consensus on how these things may be incorporated in a broader sense, rather just within the kind of unique or very constrained, not constrained, that's not a good word, but the limited scope purpose that we were trying to meet at the request of the commission. So that was going to be my question, and perhaps after Stephanie's comments, we can continue to have those discussions, because I'm hopeful that we could with stakeholders find the right forum for these topics to be discussed, not just for EV interconnections, but in general. So thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Katie, I see your hand is still up. Do you have another comment, or is that a legacy?
It was a legacy. I would just, echo what Rick said and say that, as staff considers next steps, I do think that there could be a path where we achieve a milestone of something that, to use Cole's words, memorializes, the work that we have done in 4 years of our program, where we've learned a lot about queue management, and yet we're still, I think, as one of your earlier suggestions made clear, and even if it means that, Cole, even if it means EDF has to refile comments, that we're kind of putting forward what are the questions of what do we focus on next, but not lumping it into queue management. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
If I could just respond to that from Katie real quick. I think generally that makes sense. Our position has been like there are things like flexible interconnection that probably are not realistic to include in the proposal at this time, and should go in a second phase in continued work of the EVIIWG. I would say that even with that, there is a separate category of recommendations, edits that are in EDF's comments, some of the other comments that were filed, that are directly relevant to language that is included in the modified proposal. So I would say that stuff, to me, just still strikes me as in scope for the queue management work, even if we are saying the flexible interconnection stuff is not right for this time.
Okay, Rick, you can go first.
Thanks, Jeremy. I want to thank you for that, and again, following on the comments of Stephanie and what you've just said, and also what Katie said, on behalf of the JU and our desire to get to a milestone. Again, I'm just going to reiterate then, I think we have to, let staff weigh in on ultimately what they want to do in regard to the milestone issue. But you know, is there if staff were to decide that this is something that needs further discussion, are there other areas here on this slide that that stakeholders feel like you know, we could kind of come to a consensus on in terms of where the right place for these things to be are?
I'm not sure if that's a question for me, Rick. I would say, I mean, some of the things make sense for the EVIIWG now. I think some of the things, you know, there's language in the commission's order as well as the governance document for the EVIIWG that talks about the group kind of folding in as a subcommittee or subgroup within the ITWG, you know, wherever it ends up being housed afterwards. Like, I recognize, you know, some of the things are relevant specifically to EV issues or are relevant to EVs and also other issues. So I think there's a broader discussion to have, but it's not just the things on this slide, right? And there are some of the things on here, like I would say the language on EAMs in the modified proposal that are directly relevant because it's in the proposal today. It's not something that another party has suggested should be added that someone is saying is out of scope. We're saying the language in the modified proposal today is out of scope.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. It was to you and to anybody else, you know, on the call, you know, who submitted comments to this effect, you know, and I think just trying to gauge, you know, hearing, you know, not speaking for the JU as a whole, but just hearing, you know, what we're hearing on the call today and from all parties, you know, just trying to gauge, you know, where, you know, additional discussion could lead us, and if we could find consensus on some issues. That's all. Thank you.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, just on that comment, thank you. I think one issue, like vehicle to grid, a lot of the times will get bunched into flexible interconnections, but there's some specific issues with the interconnection process and timelines. And in the past, we've been pointed to the ITWG, and I had a conversation with Jason Pazzi, who's leading the ITWG, and he wanted me to take on these interconnection issues directly with Con Ed and didn't really want to add that to the agenda. But there's definitely some issues within our members at New York Best, like a publicly accessible queue so that they know where projects are interconnecting, because there's sometimes they'll be in the middle of an SIR process and one company had a project going nearby and take up all the capacity, so that project wasn't able to go forward. And there's just some issues with fairness for these bidirectional chargers, and how this teams communicate within the utility. And I do think it's broader than just Con Ed. I think it's because that's where these projects are interconnecting, but I think it's important work to find a working group where we can really tackle these issues. And it's okay if the EVIIWG scope is shorter right now, but it would be great to identify where these different issues can be addressed, and so it's not misleading for stakeholders.
Hi, Richard. Thank you so much for your comment. We agree that that's a really important issue. I think, like we've said, it's staff's perspective that that's outside of the scope right now, but, you know, not saying that's not something that the EVIIWG couldn't consider in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. I understand that.
Katie, I see your hand.
Hi, Stephanie, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate Rick's question on just figuring out kind of which topics stakeholders find are related to key management. And, you know, speaking from my perspective with my team, having written the original straw proposal, you know, I think I'm at least comfortable with staff taking the pen and, you know, deciding, okay, EAMs are going to be stricken from the modified proposal that gets SAPA'd, and, you know, that's for a discussion at a later date. And that might very well be in service of keeping the scope to queue management and getting kind of to the milestone where we have addressed queue management and then moving forward to other topics. So just wanted to offer that perspective. Thanks.
If this is Rick Rose again, if I just follow on, you know, based on what Katie just said and some of the other comments, I mean, it doesn't seem like we are really that far apart here. And so, you know, some of the other items on here, I think in just, you know, in the, and I realized that comments, you know, included other topics. So don't want to, you know, disregard, you know, what I heard on that. But these are just kind of some of the high level points. And so, you know, I just feel like if we were able to go, you know, provide staff with a, you know, a consensus position going into, you know, filing some sort of a milestone that Katie just, you know, kind of made some comments on, that we would be, you know, more successful in getting further direction from the commission on how to address these things. That's just my view. So happy to hear other perspectives on that.
This is Mari. Do you mean kind of working together to identify the other issues we'd want to put forward if we are able to continue with the working group? Like kind of saying, you know, we agree there's consensus on moving these issues forward, or do you mean something else?
Yeah, exactly. So I think if we can reach consensus on, you know, what the milestone items are for compliance with the order, and then consensus on, you know, that stakeholders, you know, all of the stakeholders agree that these are items that, you know, we all agree need to continue to be worked on, and, you know, make a recommendation on you know, where those, you know, where the best place to discuss those things are. You know, I heard a comment on EVIIWG and that being tossed around. And, you know, I think if we're, you know, if they're very specific, you know, I think we stand a better chance of getting some good direction from the commission on how to take up these issues after the milestone. So yes, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, that would be very helpful. And I know that we have members who are also interested in that. So that would be very helpful.
From staff's perspective, this has all been incredibly helpful. I'm wondering if anyone has any objection to another EVIIWG meeting in which we can bring up the document, address the comments that have come in. If there are edits that we want to make live, we can try that approach. You know, if there's certain topics that members want to address on a larger scale, you know, we can bring that up. Rick?
Yeah, hi, Stephanie. Again, just if the goal of that meeting was to, as I've been kind of advocating for all the stakeholders to reach a consensus on you know, what can be the milestone document we submit and what additional items need to be developed further, and a proposal on where those items should be developed, then I think under those guidelines and the structure of that call, it could be useful.
Thank you. Cole or Mari, do either of you have any input on that approach?
Yeah, I would just say I think that would be fantastic. Just a meeting to go through the document together would be an opportunity to talk through the specific edits we're recommending and hear from the utilities on that. So I would support that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be good, and this would give an opportunity to have a little bit more dialogue on why. I know there were certain things in the proposal where, Con Ed was doing some things, other utilities weren't. They're maybe not seeing the, application volume. And so some of those things may be considered down the road, but that would also help with understanding some of those types of differences too.
Yep. And
Okay.
I would second that would be very helpful just to have separate the scope of the milestone you're trying to achieve right now, and then also have a section that's focused on where additional topics can be addressed, and maybe work through a plan for a proposal on that. I think that would be amazing.
Okay. All right, we hear you. We will get something in the works. We'll get another secretary's notice issued. In the meantime, if you have additional red lines you would like us to consider and talk through as a group, please, either submit them through DMM or send them to that EVSE email. If you have specific topics that you think absolutely should be brought up for discussion, please send us an email and let us know. We really want to make sure that this is a collaborative process.
I really appreciate everybody's input today and discussion. I think this is something that we've been trying to get at, and it was very, very helpful for staff to hear all this, and we'll get this going. I agree with Rick that I think we're pretty close to this milestone, which was required of the order right now. I do think it's with these smaller tweaks that we're talking about right now, I think we can get there relatively quickly. So look for invitation again for next month, and we'll put out an agenda, and people can feel free to add or subtract from the agenda as they see fit, and let us know.
Mari?
Yeah, sorry, just one other thing, since I'd mentioned this before on phased interconnection, if you can provide any feedback on your thoughts on that, that might help with our understanding of how it fits into the milestone now versus how it could fit into future discussions.
Sure, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.